Now, brothers and sisters, I'm here to bring you the word. And the word is that in my dictionary of business, this word plays the central role. Because to me, this is what business is all about. In a business, we bring together resources, technology, people, materials, equipment, money, and put them together in such a way that our products and services have more value to enough people out there than all the costs we incur in bringing those resources together. And that space between the value we have to offer and the costs we incur in getting there is the space in which almost everything interesting happens. It's the space in which our profitability lies. It's the space in which the economic motivation of the customer lies. So tonight we're going to examine that space between the value we have to offer and the cost we incur in getting there, but particularly the value, because that part is much less certain. We talk about the concept of customer value. Now, to me, good thinking starts with good concepts. My favorite is Albert Einstein. When he developed the special theory of relativity 100 years ago, this is the anniversary of his famous paper, he used no data, no information that wasn't available for 50 years before that. His contribution was a reconceptualization. Using no additional information, he looked at the old information and saw it in an entirely different way. And that reconceptualization has affected not only physics for the next 100 years, but our daily life, including the lasers that I'm using and all the other things that are implied by his work. So the power of conceptualization is very strong. So we want to worry about the concept of what do we mean by customer value. Now, if I have a product and I say the cost of this product is X dollars, you know what I'm talking about. I mean, we all share a concept. We understand cost of materials and equipment and labor and energy, and the accountants tell us how to allocate fixed costs. So we understand that notion. It's not very surprising. I can go on. If I said the price of this product is Y dollars, again, we understand. You give me Y dollars, I'll give you the product. And it's very simple. Very simple. We have no problem. But suppose I said the value of this product is Z dollars. You say, wait a minute. What do you mean by that? Because we don't share a conceptual structure within which a simple statement like that has any meaning. And yet we talk about value all the time. About customer value, about value added, and all sorts of value added. But do we know what we're talking about? I don't think so. So we need to develop a shared conceptual structure within which this notion has meaning, and then we can start using it constructively in our business. So what is customer value? Value-based marketing channel. The first issue is let us define and know what we mean by this concept of customer value. Once we know that, the next step is to use that in the practice. And I call the practice seeing customer value. The first step in the process is to comprehend what are the key value drivers of our customers. To comprehend what is the value. Once I've defined the concept, what is the value of this product to this customer at this time? Is it more or less than to that customer? Is it more or less than it was 5 years ago? Will it be more or less 5 years from today? And not only do we need to know the value, we need to know why the value is what it is. What drives the value of the customer? So the first step in the process is to comprehend those key value drivers. Once we understand, see, good. Missed whole first line. Once we understand what is value to the customer, then we can use it to create customer value. What is new product development? Creating new customer value. But if I understand what it is that customers value, I can go to my research and development people and tell them, this is really valuable, this is less valuable. If you need to trade off some of this for some of that, it's a good trade-off. Okay. Or the services that I provide to customers. Some people may value the services very highly, others don't value it at all. So I need to know, and if I understand what services are valued, maybe I can discontinue the value to the customers who don't value, discontinue the services and charge them a lower price, but provide it to the customers who really do value the service. All sorts of implications of using that. It's really the concept of market segmentation, taking markets and grouping customers in sensible way. Well, to me, the most sensible way is to group customers by their value. So a customer who shares a common set of values, they really value characteristics A and B, but not C and D. And this group really values C and D, but not A and B. So the very act of segmenting the market enables me to create some value. Suppose I got a product which is really strong in A and B, but only marginal in C and D. Well, instead of trying to market to everybody, those who value it highly, those who don't value it highly, at a price which is acceptable, which is going to be a lower price, maybe I should ignore those people and just target those who really value what I have to offer. And instead of getting 10% market share across the board, let's get 40% of these groups and ignore those. Okay. And if I do that, by marketing to those who value what I have most highly, I can probably get a better price for it. So the creation of customer value can come from product development, service development, or even discontinues, market segmentation. So the creation of customer value is an important application once we understand what is customer value. Now, not only do you have to create customer value, you have to communicate customer value. If the customer doesn't understand the value of what we have for them, and they often don't, they're not going to pay for it. They're not going to buy it. So the communications process is very critical in trying to capitalize the benefits of knowing customer value. Now, I have a law called Gross's Law of Communication. And that is, it's very difficult to communicate anything to anybody. Usually somebody says, you might repeat that. That's a joke. Come on, laugh it up. Laugh it up. These are the jokes. I think in many businesses, particularly industrial businesses that market to other businesses in industry, we don't take the communication process seriously. We underplay and undervalue how much communication is going to be. So we need to communicate customer value. People have to understand the values they're getting. And if we've done all those correctly, we can then capture a good share of the value with effective marketing and pricing. So this is the process that I see of seeing customer value. Okay, what should the term customer value mean when applied? What should it be? If I say the value of this product is $Z, what do I want to mean by that? What does it mean to you? Let me ask you, what does it mean to you? If I said the value of this product is $Z, what do you think that means? You. What do you think it means? What I can get, what I can sell it for. What I can sell it for, okay. Anybody else have any ideas? What do you think that means? The product is valued $Z. Yeah.
Price.
The price, okay. So the price is the same as the value, right? In other words, we don't know what we're talking about. You don't know what that means. We'll just demonstrate that very end. What should we mean? Let me tell you what I want to mean. So from now on, you will now know what customer value is. Right? We've given you the first educational component. To me, customer value is the hypothetical price hypothetical, it's not a real price because you'll never get this price. It's the hypothetical price for a supplier's offering the combination of products, services, and reputation, everything that a customer gets in a transaction with that supplier, getting that product from that supplier. So it's the hypothetical price for a supplier's offering at which a particular customer, so the value might be different for customer A to customer B, at which a particular customer would be an overall economic break-even relative to the best alternative available to the customer for performing a set of functions. So performing a set of functions, nobody wants your product. What they want is the functions that it performs. And if they can perform those functions in some more efficient way, you're history. You're gone. And if they can figure out a way where they don't need those functions, you're even greater history and even more gone. So, whenever you have an offering, there's almost always a realistic alternative. Now, sometimes it's somebody else making exactly the same product. Sometimes it's somebody making a similar product, which may be either a little better or a little worse. Sometimes it's an entirely different kind of product which performs similar functions. So the best alternative available might be a wide range of things. But value is always relative to the best alternative. There's no absolute. It's a relative value. Now the old notion of overall economic break-even. If this product saves me money relative to what I'm now doing, it saves me $100. There is a price for the product which will just eliminate all those benefits. $100 higher. That's what I mean by the benefit. The price which eliminates all the benefits. That's why it's not a price you'll ever get. But it's a critical price in that any price below that creates some benefits for the customer. Any price above that has negative. So it's that borderline between providing some value to the customer and not providing some value to the customer that I want to mean by the value of the product. So from now on, if anybody asks you, what does you mean by value, you now know and you can answer. If you can accept this as a definition, as a reasonable definition of value. If you can't, it's tough to manage. You'll have to go on anyway. Talk. Let's look at prices and costs. Where do we get the quantitative language of business? From accountants. Right? Accountants tell us what costs are. Right? And sometimes it's pretty elaborate. How do you account for fixed costs? It's always a mystery. I think they go in a dark room and burn some incense or something like that. But they have some magic processing. And all of a sudden they come out and say, well, your factory costs will go there, there, there. And then you've got to price it so you cover all those costs, right? But that's where we get the quantitative business. So we have some notions. We have total cost, and we have price. You understand those two. And the difference between those two is margin, and we know about margin. That's, accountants tell us what our margins are, and of course margins and volume is what profitability is. So the difference between price and total cost is margin. But there's another notion. We can break costs up in a variety of ways. Let me break it up into external purchases and internally generated costs. So I acquire materials or I acquire energy or whatever. Externally, those are external costs. And here's where the economists have. The economists have a concept called value added. So you have an enterprise, take its total revenue and subtract its external costs. That's the value added. Of course, value added taxes are based on that. Well, unfortunately, in this, as in so many things, the economists are wrong. That's not the value. In the vast majority of transactions that occur in the marketplace, the value to the customer is greater than the price. Sometimes it's just a little bit greater. Sometimes it's much greater. You know you bought things, oh wow, did I get a bargain on that? I would have paid 10 times the price for that, right? So the value to the customer sometimes is much greater than the price. It's not the price. But the economists tell you that everything in price and external cost, that's the value added. Well, they're wrong. The value added is virtually always greater. But we have no way of accounting until now. With the definition I gave you, I can now take that chart, which has total cost and price, and add customer value to it on the same chart. So now I have a chart that shows total cost, price, and customer value, all expressed in dollars per unit. Now I can look at this chart and think of the difference between the customer value and the total cost as the value created. So an exchange between a buyer and seller creates that bundle of value. And it's the difference between the value to the customer and the cost to the supplier. Remember right at the beginning of the talk, I said that space between value and cost is very interesting. Well, this is a picture of that space. That's the value. I used to talk about this as the value pie, because we're going to cut it up. And someone in a lecture of this sort raised their hand. I said, what is it? Irwin said that doesn't look much like a pie, full value pie. I said, you're right, it doesn't look much like a pie, does it? So from then on, I call this the value salami. Okay? Value sauce. Salami. So now we have the value salami, not the value pie. Much better. And price is the knife that cuts the salami into two pieces. One piece, the difference between cost and price is margin, and we all know that's old hat. The other piece, the piece between the value of the customer and the price, that's the value distributed to the customer, which the customer can then keep or pass it on to their customer, or prices, or volume. And that's, of course, the way wealth gets distributed in the economy. Because what we're talking about is the creation of wealth in the economy. And this value distributed becomes also the economic driving force for the customer to want to buy the product. I said that the context we're talking here is in business to business, where you're selling to a business, not to a consumer. Because in a business, the principal motivator for purchase is economic. They'll make money out of it, cut their costs, or something like that. The vast majority of consumer purchases, the values are not economic. They're social, they're psychological, they're aesthetic. So the vast majority of consumer products are bought not for their functionality. Coca-Cola quenches your thirst, but a glass of water will do that. It's how Coca-Cola makes you feel about yourself that Coke wants to express. You want to buy a car, almost any car will get you from point A to point B in reasonable safety. But a new Mercedes driving down the street, having your friends see you in that brand new car, you can't replace that feeling. So the vast majority, the genius of consumer marketing is creating what I'll call non-functional utility. Values which have nothing whatsoever to do with the function of the product. And that's what consumer marketing is all about. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about marketing to a business, an industry, an institution, where the economic benefits are principal. And there may be some other benefits, but they're relatively small. If I have a product and I can demonstrate to you that if you buy my product at my price, your bottom line will be better than if you buy that competing product at their price. And if you're convinced that I'm right, you'll buy my product. Whether you like my tie or personality or anything else about it, you'll buy my product. This is an economic motivation. If I can demonstrate the economic benefits, I probably have to say. And that's the context we're talking about. The principal motivation is economic. There's one other element. The perceived value. Remember the definition I had is the price which produces economic break-even, real economic break-even. But that's hard to figure out sometimes. There is a price. It's real. It's sometimes hard to count. So the perception of value might be different than the actual value. It might be lower or higher sometimes. And that space between the real value and the perceived value has potential value lost in the system. If the customer is perceiving fairly low value and the real value is high, and I come in with a price somewhere in here, does he buy the product? No. The price is above his perceived value, you don't think it's safe. Who loses? Do you lose? Sure, you should have made that. The customer loses. Yes, you should have made that purchase. So to the extent that the perceived value deviates from the real value substantially, there's a great potential for value loss in the system. Or that value will not be created. That wealth will not be created. It's left on the table. And one of the roles of communication is to bring the perceived value communication is to bring the perceived value as close as possible to the real value. And that way there's no value. Does it pay to bring the perceived value above the real value? People to think it's worth more than it really is? You think you want to do that? Not to a business. If they buy something because they think it'll cure baldness and improve your sex life, they'll buy it once. But when it doesn't work, they'll never buy anything from you again. So you really don't want, those who are salespeople know that the worst thing to do is overpromise. When you overpromise and don't deliver, it means mud, right? So the system works best when the perceived value is equal to the real value. And one of the economic roles of communication is to make that happen. Let me go on. Let's look at that value salami. No one ever forgets the value salami. Let's look at the issues around the value salami. One issue is, how do you enlarge the salami? How do you make it bigger? Okay? Both parties benefit if you have more salami, right? The second issue is, where do you cut the salami? Now, the first issue of, we're talking about game theory. How many familiar with the notion of a zero-sum game? Familiar with that idea of zero-sum game? Here you are. A zero-sum game is a game in which the net winnings of all the players is zero. So a friendly poker game. I come in with $20. I play poker for several hours, and I count my money, I'm at $10. The $10 that I lost was all won by somebody else. So if you look at the whole group, the net change is zero. Money changed hands, but the same amount of money was there at the end as well. That's a zero-sum game. Well, once you think of a zero-sum game, you can also think of a positive-sum game. But the very act of playing the game enhances the value. So for example, international trade. It's a positive-sum game. Both parties win. Both parties' economies benefit. And transactions in the marketplace, a buyer and a seller, a free marketplace exchanging goods for money, is a positive-sum game. Because the buyer will get something that's more valuable than the price, and the seller will get something which is greater than his cost. Each gets something out of the bargain. And the system increases as well. Sort of a magic price. And that's how wealth is created in an economy, through millions of these transactions every single day, in which a little bit of wealth is created. And the cumulative effect of that we call growth in GDP. And all that is an accumulation of thousands of transactions, each of which creates a little atomic unit of wealth. Now, there is unfortunately also a negative sum game. You might think of war as a negative sum game. In a war, there may be a winner and a loser. But at the end of war, there are a lot of people killed, property destroyed, people displaced. By any measure, it's negative, even though there's a winner and a loser. So the notion of game theory tells us about it. I'm particularly interested in the zero-sum game. In fact, recently, a couple of weeks ago, the Nobel Prize was given in economics. Some game theories. Well beyond what I'm talking about. But that's essentially what they want. Let me look for a minute at the buyer-seller relationship. Very interesting relationship between buyers and sellers. In the buyer-seller relationship, there are two games going on at all times. There's the positive sum game, the win-win game, where both buyers and sellers benefit. That's why they interact with one another. Benefit something that's both. So they cooperate to expand the salami. So if I'm a seller, I go to my buyer and I really understand what you value. Maybe I can enhance my product at fairly low cost to make it much more valuable to you. Right? That's cooperation. Makes the salami bigger. Or you as a buyer may figure out that if I buy in larger quantities, I can store it pretty well. But it creates some benefits for you. Give me a share of that benefit by lowering my price. So there are various mechanisms for cooperation which expand the salami. So a key part of any business relationship, the buyer-seller relationship, is the positive sum game, the win-win. However, embedded in that is also a zero-sum game. The conflict as to where to cut the salami. So if I get more salami, you get less salami. If you get more salami, I get less salami. So it's the source of basic conflict between buyers and sellers. So we have a schizophrenic relationship, a crazy relationship, because they're cooperating to make things better for both and then fighting over how to slice it up. And both games are going on all the time and you can't escape them. So you've got to understand this relationship, a very peculiar relationship. How to enlarge the salami? What can we do to make the salami? Well, we can try to increase customer value by improving performance or features, etc. So we make the product more valuable. Understanding what the customer value is, make it more valuable. I've enlarged this. Now, let me separate product value from supplier value. Product value is inherent in the product itself. Anybody who sold that product would deliver that product. But suppliers differ in the quality of services they provide, etc. So supplier values may differ considerably between supplier A and B, even though the product is identical. So we really have to divide these values into product values and supplier values and understand them separately, two different issues. But both of them can potentially increase customer value by understanding what's valued by customers. The other way is to decrease supplier costs. So if I'm the supplier, I can reduce my costs. The salami is margin, right? Which ends up in customer value and supplier costs. So we can try it through manufacturing efficiency, reducing low-value products, etc. And we can decrease supplier service costs by eliminating low-value services. If I'm providing services, it turns out nobody values. Suppose I'm supplying technical services. And I've got one customer who's got very good technical staff themselves. They don't need my service. They don't value it. I've got another customer who doesn't have that level of technical expertise, and they love those services. Now I have a conflict. I'm trying to charge the same price to two people, one of whom has much more value for what I have to offer. Yep. What do I do? Maybe I can eliminate the services here and do something else, or eliminate them here and charge a lower price. Or I can unbundle the services and sell you the services separately, for example. There's a variety of things to make that happen. So, we can decrease suppliers' costs in a variety of ways. Where to cut the slump? That's the source of power. You need to understand. Now, one thing you have to understand, there's no theoretically right place to cut the slump. I can't go through some equations and come up and say, well, the right place to cut the slump is right there. It doesn't work that way. Well, what is it that determines where the salami is cut? And the answer is power. The relative power of the buyer versus the seller. That determines where the salami is cut. And in general, in most situations, the buyer has more power than the seller. The buyer has more power than the seller because, in general, it's easier for a buyer to replace a supplier than it is for a supplier to replace a customer. And that gives them. So we have an imbalance. Buyer power versus seller power. Buyer power is greater. And buyer power is especially strong when there's no seller differentiation. If the products are the same, the service is the same, it's a straight commodity, whoever gives me the lowest price gets the business, period. That's all there is. Right? That's when the buyer is very powerful. They run the show. It's also enhanced by the buyer's knowledge of suppliers' costs. Now, there are many businesses. If you have an important supplier that's really critical to your business, you have 4 people working on what is that supplier's cost? What is his labor cost? What is the material cost? What's the changes in productivity? So when I come in to negotiate on Ford or General Motors or Toyota, I know those suppliers' costs down to a tiny fraction of a penny. That means that I know exactly how far I can drive those prices. And then I drive it a little bit further. So you come into the negotiation, you're the supplier. General Motors says, well, you've done a great job. So this year you're lucky. We're only going to cut your prices by 3%. And what do you say? You say, thank you, sir. Because he's right. No, they don't trust you. It's power. Let's look at seller. When does the seller have the always more power than the buyer? When it's temporarily high in situations of short supply. So when there's short supply, then the seller has the power. Right? You have a lot of ships, and there's a big demand for ships, and somebody needs a ship. What happens is their price higher or low. It's high. You have power. So it's temporary. Because in industry, if it's high for very long, you can bet that someone's going to add new capacity with a new ship's built, with another plant built. And when that happens, new capacity comes on stream. All of a sudden, there's overcapacity. And what happens to prices? So it's temporary. It's always a temporary thing. It's also high when you have unique high-value products. Something which produces, or really no one else has it, unique benefits that's very high value to some people. That's when you have some power to charge good prices, no matter what the cost. I'm not talking about cost, information costs, and it's also high, it's enhanced by the seller's knowledge of the customer's value. In fact, The seller's knowledge of the customer value plays exactly the same role in the zero-sum game as the buyer's knowledge of the customer's costs, which they spend a lot of time trying to find out. Now, do we as sellers spend anywhere near that much time knowing what the value of the customer value is? No. Because until about 20 minutes ago, you didn't even know what the question meant. Now you know what the question is. Now maybe you'll spend more time and effort trying to know what that customer value is. And when you know that, you now have some power in negotiation. Yeah, an illustration. I taught my course to a company in the States. They were the leader in their field. They were approached by one of the big companies, Ford or something. General Motors Ford said, "We want you to be our sole supplier. You'll supply all of this product category, guaranteed. However, since you're our sole supplier, we have no competitive bidding. So in order to do that, you're going to have to tell us your costs." And the company said, "Let me think about it." Went home. And a week later came back and said, "No, I don't think so. We're not going to tell you our costs." The gentleman said, "No, you don't seem to understand. That wasn't a question. You will tell us your costs." So the company said, "Give me another week." They came in a week later and said, "Tell you what we'll do. We will tell you our costs. Every nickel of cost, right down to the bottom, on one condition. That you let us determine our value. Would you let us go in and look at what are your alternatives, how you're benefiting, how the costs are saved by using our products and services?" And you know what General Motors' reaction was? "No way! You're out of your mind! We're not going to do that!" And this company said, "Well, if you don't show us yours, we won't show you ours." And they walked away. But got the business in. They went home and did some analysis. They said, General Motors can't afford to walk away. Our value is so significantly higher than our competitors for that we'll get the business anyway. So they took a huge risk, walking away from a huge amount of business, and won. Very profitable. That's part of what knowing customer value. That's power. That's power in the negotiation. Knowing when to walk away. Being confident enough that your numbers are right, that you can exert that kind of power. You know, the value-based marketing channel. Work, that's what I had to do. Am I going backwards? No. Can't. This is high technology. That was what I want to talk about customer value. I'm happy to entertain some questions. Hopefully stimulated some thoughts in your part. If you have any questions on anything we've talked about, expanding on anything we've talked about, I'm happy to answer. We've all learned everything I have to say. I must be a fantastic student. I have to get a raise. You have to give me more money. Any questions? Yes.
So the thing is to understand customer value, for example, the conjoint analysis, so the gains the product and value mapping.
Right.
How do you evaluate systems as a reality and able to buy the customer value?
The question was, there's a technique called conjoint analysis. Anybody familiar with that? It's a fairly sophisticated technique for analyzing customer value, knowing what the value of the customer. And it involves, I'll give you an illustration. The Marriott Hotel Corporation applied this. They're thinking about developing a new chain of motels in years to come. They want to analyze business, the target market is business travel. And they want to find out what do business travelers value. So So there are several dimensions which they go. How close it is to where they're going, 1 mile, 5 miles, 20 miles. Does it provide, what kind of breakfast does it provide? Hot breakfast, cold breakfast, or no breakfast? Is there computer access in the building? A series of things of that sort. Is there a desk space where you can just work? So there's a series of dimensions, 5 or 6 or 8 dimensions, whatever. They then take one level of performance. So for example, the breakfast has 3 levels, hot, cold, none. They take one level of performance from each of the dimensions and design a proposed package, a description of a hotel offer. And price might be in there, $100 a night or $200 or whatever. So you design the package. Then you go and take a different level of performance from all these dimensions and design a second package. Then you offer it to a customer and say, okay, which of these 2 do you prefer? I say, no, I like that. Then I get another package in a carefully designed experimental design. I offer a series of mixed of these characteristics. And by carefully designing that, I can then analyze and break down what it is that seems to be valuable to the customer. It's a complex technique. It's used in a variety of circumstances. Now, what was your question? Remember, it had to do with conjoint.
Yes, yeah, through using the conjoint analysis, we can clearly capture the real value.
Oh, you think it's not a good technique?
Yeah, how the particular factors are process values.
Well, that's true, and that's absolutely correct. What you get at best is perceived value. You're absolutely right. That maybe, but in the case of the hotel, the perceived value is the real value. It's much more of a consumer product, but the value is in the head of the consumer. But if you're doing it on a product, I would much rather do a serious value analysis, an economic analysis, asking what is the real value of this product. And sometimes they come up. Let me give you an illustration. I gave this lecture to Alcoa, big room. And this was a commodity product, sheet aluminum. You don't get any more commodity than sheet aluminum. Everyone's sheet aluminum is just about like everybody else. With one slight exception. About 15 years ago, Alcoa invested in Bettendorf, Iowa, which is the biggest rolling mill in the world, into a rolling machine which rolled out the widest sheet in the industry. The aluminum was just like everybody else's aluminum, but it was wider. Well, it turned out there are 2 markets that really like wide sheet. Folks who build airplanes, like Boeing, and folks who build trailer turbines. They would use the wide sheet every place they could. Well, let's think about that. What is the best alternative? If Boeing couldn't get the wide sheet, what would they do instead? Well, they use 2 narrower sheets riveted together, right? So we're comparing the value of the wide sheet versus 2 narrower sheets riveted together. And I teach this course for Alcoa, and someone who's sheet maker posed the question: what is the value of the wide sheet to Boeing in the 747? And that was his job. No idea. So that's the alternative. Why do you think Boeing likes the wide sheet rather than 2 narrow sheets? What's the source of that? What is the underlying value? Any idea why they like the wide sheet instead of 2 sheets riveted together? They're riveted. You have labor costs. Somebody's got to rivet it, right? Anything else? As it turns out, there's not a safety. No one knows how to rivet better than Boeing. They are probably the best riveters in the world, and there really is not a safety. They are riveting. If you ever need riveting done, go to Boeing. They're really good at it. So really, safety was not an issue. But this fellow didn't even count on labor costs. He counted only one thing: the weight of the rivets and the weight of the overlap that's required for it. What drives aircraft is weight. Because every pound you add when you're building an airplane will burn fuel for the next 50 years. And there are even rules of thumb as to how much it's worth to save to save a pound when you go to bed. So we calculated the weight of the rivets, the weight of the overhead. How much more would the plane weigh if they didn't have the light sheet? And then apply the rule of thumb as to what it's worth to save a pound. And then back calculated at what price for the aluminum would wipe out that value. That's what that is. He was stunned by it. He did it 4 times to make sure there wasn't any mistakes. Took it to his management. They were stunned by the results. They did it 4 times to make sure there wasn't any mistakes. And they couldn't see any mistakes. Now at the time, Alcoa was getting a small price premium for the light sheet, 2-3%. Today they're getting over 20%. The whole analysis was 4 lines of algebra on the back of an envelope. That's the whole analysis. And all the information was like Einstein. All the information was there, readily available. Why didn't they do that 10 years earlier? Why didn't somebody ask, what's the value of light sheet to Boeing? No one asked it because no one knew what the question was. This is where the conceptualization, being able to ask the question and answer it, and the answer was simple, not complicated, was very powerful. Those 4 lines of algebra have been worth millions of dollars every year throughout the whole. In fact, I was teaching a course on purchasing strategy at Penn State. And one of the people I was teaching about value, some people think of it as consorting with the enemy, but I don't think that way. The system works better if the buyers buy well, the sellers sell. And one of the people in the class is from Boeing. And I gave this illustration. A fellow from Boeing said, you know, I was involved in that. I remember when Alcoa came up with the price increase on those light sheets. Well, we went back to the drawing board and started doing a calculation. We decided they were right. We couldn't afford not to buy it. We've been getting away with it for like 10 years. And they suddenly caught on just how valuable this thing was. Now, prior to raising the price, no one at Boeing ever calculated what's the value because they don't need to know that. The customer only needs to know that the value is greater than the price. Once they know that, then their job is to get the price down. To beat you over the head, no matter what the value is. They're better off because they get more salami by getting the price down. And they'll never tell you how valuable the product is. They'll just look and smile. You're not going to learn from the customer. They're not going to. There's nothing in it. This is a good example of how the conceptualization, the power of the concept, leads directly to important results. Another question?
You say the loss of perceived value, the customer can reduce it?
The customer can reduce the perceived value? Well, the supplier, by educating the customer, by communicating, can decrease the value lost by bringing the perceived value higher. And a key role of advertising in business and industrial products is to do exactly that. When you've got a product, say you've got a more commodity-like product, but even in commodities, some suppliers get price premium. I worked for the DuPont company for many years. Many DuPont's businesses have price premium, 3, 4, 5% above what the market paid for products that were no different. They were identical. But DuPont got a premium. Then I started posing the question, why? In fact, we often use the terminology, we command a price premium now. Well, that's bad terminology. You don't command anything in the market. The market grants you a price premium. Grudgingly. They don't want to grant you a price premium. They'd rather not pay you a price premium, and they'll do everything they can to avoid paying you a price premium. But at the end of the day, if you stick to your guns, they'll come down with, I hate paying those bastards. Damn it, it's worth it. That's where you want to be. Damn it, it's worth it. You don't want to satisfy them. You want a customer who's dissatisfied with the price, but pays it anyway. That's right. Any other questions? Yes?
You said something about in industrial marketing, I guess, the value is not well communicated to someone?
Yes.
Why is that the case? I mean, shouldn't be the...
I think many industrial businesses don't appreciate the value of communication. They're run by technical people. Okay? Very businesses I've seen, whether it's metals or chemicals or technology, the people running those businesses are usually technical. And they dismiss communication as kind of soft and pleasant. For example, what I find is, what's the first thing to go in business type of stuff? Well, two things to go. One is training, and the other is advertising. It's a marginal thing, something that people hate. They don't take it seriously because in many cases, they don't understand what the role of advertising is. In a commodity-like product where you have a premium price, you're getting 3, 4, 5%. I think the principal role of advertising, and broadly marketing is trade shows, the whole marketing communications, the principal role is to reinforce those elements of relative perceived value that are contributing to your ability to get a premium price. Because the reason people are paying you a price premium is not because you're nice people and you give to charity and you give to your mother. That's not the reason. The only reason they'll grudgingly pay you a price premium is because they think it's worth it. It's up to you to understand why it's worth it. What is there about what I'm doing that's worth it? And make sure you continue to communicate that. If you don't, the competitors are always saying, we're just going to fail. And you'll erode that perception of that. So as the price leader, it's up to you to keep reinforcing. In fact, I would venture to say the principal role of marketing in that kind of commodity business is the understanding and management of those relative perceived values that are contributing to your ability to sustain the. That's the main role of marketing. So I think that most of the companies do not value that. And they often dismiss advertising as fluff marketing. And I think in many cases they make a serious mistake. Question? Additional question?
So we have plenty of time until 9 o'clock, so please don't hesitate to ask many questions to Dr. Gross. He's very happy to answer your questions.
Don't have questions, I'll say other things. I'll do my tap dance, whatever.
You have something called premium values? Or just
What?
a premium price?
A premium price.
And premium value?
Well, it's based on a premium value. For example, if your product performs better, it saves some costs. For example, if it's selling to an industry which uses equipment, and your product causes less downtime on the equipment, it saves money. That's a premium value. And if you understand that it does that, you get a premium price for it. If you don't understand that, they'll knock you down to compete with everybody else. That's why it's important for you to know what it is about your offering that does have that, so that you can insist on a premium price and have the customer say, damn it, it's worth it, and buy it. So there is premium value in that sense.
That will translate to higher perceived value.
Let's say premium performance. If you have a product which does better, that if you communicated that well and the customer understands that, that contributes to the value of your product. And if you understand it as well, you can get a better price for the product. If you understand that. Yes, please. Very good question. The question was, what is the importance of brand value? Why does my own company, the letters D-U-P-O-N-T, why does that have value? Well, the answer is it doesn't have value. What does have value are the associations that have been built into that over time. For example, DuPont traditionally has been a leader in research and development in the products in which they operate. And they communicate that. If you ever receive the corporate advertising government contract, they always talk about leadership and technology. Well, that's very nice. But why would somebody value leadership and technology? Well, suppose you're a company, and you're the technological leader in your business. The other company is not. They're a follower. They never heard of it. When you're the technological leader, you usually want to have a supplier the technological leaders together. Because that's often where your differential advantage comes from. In fact, you often will have a joint development with a technological leader. And that's worth something. I want to deal with DuPont because I want to make sure they're one of my major suppliers. So when they have an innovation, I'm first on line to get that. That gives me a advantage. So it's not the letters D-U-P or P-O-N-T that have that. It's those associations that means technological leadership. And for some customers, not all, that is valuable. And that reinforces that value. So this customer who doesn't need technological leadership, always the third one in the industry with anything, they're not going to pay a premium price to have a technological leader. They don't need that. So the market segment that a DuPont would deal with is technological leadership. Consider this, look at the market share of DuPont among technological leaders, whether customers are technological leaders, in any industry, versus technological followers, who is significantly higher among technological leaders. That was their market segment. And because they were perceived accurately as a leader in technology. Perceptions are usually accurate. Sometimes they're not, but the markets are pretty savvy, they're pretty knowledgeable, and they perceive that. I have a general rule, these markets tend to perceive accurately and behave accurately. Remarkably good mechanism for creating truth and justice. Any other questions? Yes, please.
I'm wondering, in your experience, consulting, have you experienced where people rely on the value from the suppliers on high, even though they are continuing the relationship? So,
You
rationally,
mean the
they
supplier is not providing value,
Right.
but continue the relationship anyway?
should. Right.
Yeah, if it's my brother-in-law. If the supplier is my wife's brother, I'll buy from him, right? I won't be happy about it, but it's better than arguing with my wife all the time, right? So there's a circumstance in which you'll buy from somebody who may not provide real value. Well, value, not arguing with your wife is high value. So it does create some value. But in general, if you have a supplier, look, if you know their value is not as great as other suppliers, you may have dealt with them so long, you don't even know what the other suppliers are doing. So you don't perceive that they're any worse than anybody else, even though they may have gotten worse than them. So yeah, you might deal with it. But eventually, the truth will out and you'll understand that you're losing a lot of money.
Because if you look in Japan,
Okay?
most of the big companies, they continue using the suppliers for a long time, even though new developments and market have changed. So in Japan, relationships or trust tend to be more powerful than the value analysis. Traditionally.
Traditionally, I think traditionally is an important word.
Right.
Because as Japanese companies have to compete in the world market, you won't be able to afford to do that. Because competitors are not doing that. So I think the pressures of the marketplace will force breaks in those kinds of traditional relationships. And it happened overnight, but at some point, the companies will have to adapt to the new realities. We can't afford to have suppliers whose quality is not good enough and whose services are poor. It'll just recruit.
A good example is AC Nielsen. It's a American company, research company. And I used to work there. And we were using KBR, NTT for all the communication. Whereas there were many foreign companies providing very cheap services. But the manager was Japanese, didn't want to discontinue.
There are non-economic factors that play a role.
Right.
What I'm suggesting is that as world competition gets more severe with those non-economic factors can't sustain itself. Except the brother-in-law factor, that can sustain it forever. Forget that. But no, there are many cultures in which they prefer to deal with friends and with people they can communicate with, rather than getting the best of another. There's no question about that. But I think that breaks it down. Because worldwide competition nowadays is very severe. Not just competing with other people in your backyard, you're competing with China, Malaysia, U.S., Mexico. And you have to adapt to the realities of those different times. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to ask a somewhat similar couple of questions, or at least more comments, I guess. I've noticed that the preference for the local suppliers versus foreign suppliers with the business environment, but oftentimes there is an element of the cost for the value associated with it. In other words, the ease of communication, of following up the problems and so forth, has a major part in the business relationship. The foreign company may offer what appears to be the better products, but when you factor in all of the communications and aftercare and so forth, it ends up being more expensive.
That's fair enough, because you really have to look at the whole package.
Right.
If their product is better and their services are better, but I can't communicate with them, then it's no point having better products and services. So I agree with you, that has to be included in the values that are provided, is ease of communication and ability to deal with them in an efficient way. That's part of the package. I agree with that.
Can I follow up with the question about communication?
Sure.
I'm working for the typical U.S. engineering-oriented small company where they tend to focus on the engineering features and functions and so forth. This company I just trying to hunt for. They don't do any sort of value type of stuff you talked about, right? How do I work in that kind of environment? How can I influence the company that maybe we can focus more on the value than just simply when the customer says, well, we need this specification, we need this specification, blah, blah, blah. How do we move to more value when we're selling that pitch?
If you understand that would be desirable value to do, I would propose it, even if I know absolutely it's going to be rejected. And then 6 months later, I propose it again. So you get so annoying something like this. Particularly, you can offer some case studies. This happened here, this is the result. But you need to expose people to those ideas. And if you give up and say it's not going to be accepted and don't expose them, they'll never get it. So it's like being in the hold of the ship, yelling up to the captain, "Hey, there's an iceberg!" And, it's part of. If you believe that that's an important part of the business, it's part of your responsibility as a good employee is to call their attention to it and keep doing it. And I did that in my career many times, where I knew darn well that what I proposed would not be accepted, but I proposed it anyway because it planted an idea. If you do it well, if you communicate it well, make persuasive arguments, you plant ideas, which eventually grow to fruition. Of course, sometimes you turn out weeds in case you're a problem.
Let me come in. I think from my experience also, what you said about cases, so if you can find out that some other company doing the same thing in other countries as a case study, and then you propose it, is much easier than saying, hey, you should correct something.
Yeah,
and I found it works in Japan.
Right.
So if you bring some case studies, somebody have done it in some country, some companies, and you put it.
I agree. That brings it reality, brings it
Right.
home to reality.
Rather than saying,
Not just a general proposal, you ought to focus on value. Tell them the story about Boeing, of how they understood the value and were able to get a lot more money from it. Getting a lot more money from it, that gets their attention. Okay. But those case studies are very valuable. Gives them an idea of what the reality is, not just the theory. Yes.
I really like your salary, series, and we wanted to, enlarge the salary series. So, what should really just like the supply party and the buyer party really should they do, and what kind of benefit they really can get from enlarged the salary?
Right. Well, we're doing that all the time. To the extent that we try to develop products which are valuable to customers, and we succeed at it, we're enlarging the salami. So it's nothing new. I've just put a different word on it, that's all. express it in a colorful language. But the people do it, and that's what people do, is make their product better and more valuable to customers and try to get some better prices for it. So that's an integral part of what really happens in the business. It's there anyway. But by expressing it in this way, and by separating out the enlarging of the salami from cutting the salami, I hope it clarifies some of the problems in buyer-seller relations, some of the opportunities and problems. But if you enlarge it, if you create more value, so now you have a bigger salami, and you communicate it so they recognize the salami is bigger, then you can get a share of that by slicing the salami at a higher level. So you benefit and they benefit. It's a win-win. It's a positive sum. Now, if you enlarge it and then yield to their pressure not to increase the price, then they win and you lose. It's easy.
That's really, if I was to make a comment, because I'm working on this, trying to enlarge the salami right now. But I'm involved in the mobile video communication business from Park Supplier standpoint. This is an amazing market where there's a 10 million concept in Japan, which is mobile video communication capable. How did anybody use that? How did anybody use that? And as a result, the salami of the mobile video communication is very thin. And I'm trying to get all my stuff, but they don't see the value. So I have to be able to enlarge that salami. In other words, the value of the mobile video communication gets bigger, then my piece should be bigger. The idea is to make the value of the services perceived much greater than what it is today.
And also to communicate that. Figure out why you're not, if this is really something valuable to customers, why are you unable to communicate that? Customers want more value. They'd like to have better performance. They'd like to have better.
So the most important thing that you have to communicate
Right.
is the buyers.
Exactly. And so that's why I say that we pay much too little attention to effective communication. It's really an important part of what you do in business. And we don't pay enough attention to it because we dismiss it. And particularly technically oriented people tend to dismiss that. You know, it's the better mousetrap theory.
How about if the buyer, they don't understand, if you try to communicate with them, well, how about if they don't understand the value of your product?
Okay, let me, that's a good question. Let me describe a smart buyer from a dumb buyer. Now, the dumb buyer, you come in and say, well, we did this wonderful stuff that adds value. You know what they say? Don't give me all that crap. Just give me a better price. That's the dumb buyer. Okay? Now, the smart buyer really understands what you've done. What does he say? He says, don't give me all that crap. Just give me a better price. Can't tell the difference. Because his job is to get the price down no matter what the value is. That's his job. So he won't acknowledge you have real value. He'll just say, forget about it. Just give me a better price, right? Am I right? So even if you've communicated the value and the buyer fully understands that value, they still will put pressure on you and they won't tell you they understand the value. What you've got to do, though, is say, no, I won't give you a better price, and this is why. And the smart buyer will say, you're right, you've got to buy it. But it's a risk. You're not sure whether you're dealing with the dumb buyer or the smart buyer. So if you're going to actually apply some of these value notions, you're going to take some risks. I'm not promising you a rose garden. No, this is hard work, gathering a lot of information you don't gather now, and taking big risks. That's all I'm promising. But the companies I've seen that do that benefit handsomely. Lose a few, but benefit handsomely too. It's hard. It's hard work. This is not easy. If it was easy, it would have been done years ago. Any question?
Next question, please.
You know, let me just make a comment on the buyer-seller relationship. I've been studying businesses for 40 years. One old guy, really old. And the business function that has improved the most is purchasing. The purchasing environment 40 years ago, purchasing was a dead-end job, it was a backwater job. It was old Charlie who used to be a salesman, who couldn't love the background. So go to the purchasing, you can't do much harm. You take Charlie out to a ball, treat him to a nice dinner, and you probably have a friend. That's not true. The purchasing function has improved. It's much more professional work, much more sophisticated. And in fact, the purchasing function has been driving the market. We used to think of marketing as the proactive elements in the market. So purchasing is a rather passive element. What you're getting now is very proactive. There's a book written by two professors at Arizona State University called Reverse Marketing. And it's aimed at purchasing. The basic premise is, if you don't like the structure of the supply industry, change. Go to a supplier who never thought of getting in this business. And say, we'll guarantee you 3 years of business if you get in this business. Just to change the structure. You only have 2 suppliers now that are diluting a little bit, prices are too high. That's proactive purchasing. Changing the structure of the market. You wouldn't have heard about that 30 years ago, but you hear about it today. So we're facing, as marketers, and I assume many of you are marketers on the marketing side of business, as marketers, we're facing this much more difficult, much more complex, much more sophisticated purchasing environment. And we haven't learned fully to adapt to that. And I think one of the key elements of adaptation is knowing customer value. When you come in with a knowledge of what is the value of the customer, you now have restored some power to yourself. Because you know when, it's like a poker game, you know when to fold, you know when to bid, you know when to hold it. Because you now have a better understanding and knowledge of just what the risks are, just how much value you have. And then if you can communicate that well, you can probably get it. Because they are more sophisticated, and they understand in most cases what the values are. Again, they won't tell you that, but they do. Questions? Comments?
Next questions? Any final questions?
Any questions? Ask me what I had to do. Whatever. Any other questions or comments or observations or your own experience that might
You're going to ask him
illuminate the
his
issue?
age, actually. But other than that, any kind of questions.
Yes. Go to the table. Any other questions or comments or observations?
Do you own a business?
Do I personally own it? I'm a
Yes.
professor. No, I just talk about it. I don't actually do it. I pride myself. I'm now at the end of my career. I have a very illustrious and good career, having never done anything. It's great. And they pay me well, too. It's terrific. Yeah. No, don't own it. My wife owns a business. She has a very small business, and I'm her consultant. On pricing.
A good one.
On pricing. And in fact, a couple of years ago, her prices were too high. I looked at her books and said, yeah, come on, you have invested in this thing, you're not making any money. Raise your prices. So she nervously said, get them up 10 or 15%, and we'll see what happens. Because you're not getting anything now. They got them up 10 or 15%, didn't lose anything with it. It just became more profitable. I said, okay, you're not far enough. Go another 10 or 15% next year. Give another 10 or 15% next year, and they lost a little bit of it. I said, okay, you're far enough now. But in 2 years, we went up 25%. The business made from barely breaking even to very nicely profitable.
What is the business?
Oh, she's a children's book distributor. Specifically for, in the U.S., there's a federally subsidized program called Reading is Fundamental, RIP, which gets books in the hands of poor children who don't normally have books at home. And part of it goes to a school, and the schools have to be eligible for having a large number of poor kids. And they must buy from a designated distributor. And my wife's business is a designated distributor. She has 2 employees, and she hardly works in business. We travel too much. So it's a great business. Now it used to be bad business. Now it's good business. I have to put out a new catalog this year, too. I'm waiting for the results. September, but we just came in. Our catalog went out in the middle of August. And sales were up 30%. And I have to start paying for this stuff. I take it out in 20 minutes.
Next, please. Next questions.
Question? Yes.
So today with the internationalization, globalization of businesses, how do you sell in different environments?
How do you what? I'm sorry.
How do you sell a product or sell something in different environments?
in different environments. Okay, that's a good point. There are many circumstances, even within a market, where the product has different values in different applications of different markets, sometimes substantially different. Right? What are you doing to those circumstances? Well, let me think about that. Let's look at an airline. If you're responsible for pricing for an airline, it's a job you don't want. It's a job you really don't want. But if you look at the market for air travel, there are two major segments, the business traveler and the pleasure traveler. Who has more value for the flight, the business traveler or the pleasure traveler? What do you think? What's that? Business travel. Why?
Because they're flying more frequently.
No. Frequent flyer has nothing to do with it.
They have a benefit where they're going.
No.
They pay more money.
No.
They travel more comfortable.
No. Because they have no alternative. Remember, value is relative to the best alternative. If I have to be in Singapore tomorrow night, I have no alternative for getting out ahead. If I'm a vacation traveler, I have a lot of options. I can go now or later, I can go someplace else, many more options. So relative to the best alternative, I have many more alternatives. So the reason it's more valuable is that there are no alternatives. How does an airline take advantage of that? Well, they structure the pricing in such a way. I know in the U.S., I don't have it here, but it used to be that if you stayed over a Saturday night, you bought a flight which had a Saturday night and your price was lower. If you didn't, your price was higher. Well, think about it. What has staying over Saturday night got to do with running an airline? And the answer is absolutely nothing. What it does do is discriminate between two market segments which have very different value for exactly the same thing. The business traveler will probably come home and the company will pay for it. They want to be home for it. The pleasure traveler will probably stay over Saturday night anyway. So by imposing that Saturday night stay, it prevents the business traveler from getting the pleasure traveler price. So I'm able to discriminate. And in that way, the same seat might cost the business traveler $1,000 and the pleasure traveler $200. And there may be ways of doing that in your business. I've seen that done in business. Maybe there's a chemical company that they had a product, a chemical product, which had two major applications. A very high value application, which was 10% of the volume, and a low value application was 90% of the volume. And of course, they sold everybody at the same price, so the high value application got tremendous value out of it. And of course, the company knew it. So they did some work, and they figured out a way of introducing a chemical into this chemical, which disabled the use of this product for the high value application, but had no impact on the low value application. So in their production, they produced 90% with this chemical and 10% pure. Guess what the price of the pure product is? Way up. Because it was more valuable. They found a Saturday night. They found a way of discriminating between those two customers, those two market segments, which have very different values, and capture a value price for both those segments. You don't think about that until you look for it. You extend the value notion. Yeah.
Because you talk about airlines and airplanes, I guess.
Yeah.
I would think this value couldn't be that easy to do. Meaning, for example, in the airline business, between what Airbus is doing versus Boeing for the next generation. And the solution could be any different. A380, the big one, versus Boeing 787. So obviously, this is a business tool. They're selling into the same set of airline companies to make more money, but completely different tools.
You mean the airplanes are
The airplane, yeah, the 387, which is large, lot of versus medium size. So they're proposing completely two different type of tools to make money in airline business. So obviously, if they have different expectation of value to the
Exactly.
airline customers.
And in fact, they may have different values for different airlines, or for different circumstances. Ones that fly very long routes may have one value. If the routes are not so long, it may be a different value. The weight of the planes is always has value. And in fact, they adjust the price because of the weight. So there may be market segments among the airlines and among the kinds of ways in which they're used, in which both or either, one has value in some segments, the other has value in others. So it's a market segmentation question. Under what conditions would you prefer an Airbus to a Boeing, whatever, 730, whatever the number is in there, 767 or whatever. And they each may have high value for some particular situations or applications. So it's really segmentation we're talking about. It's not a uniform mass market.
Okay, the next question.
Question, comment, observation? Okay. Folks, 5 of 9. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gross.
Go home and take that.